the process on the left of cancellation, as you started to talk about with the perfect rhetorical fortress, the first step is dismiss a person if you can put a label of conservative on them, you can dismiss them in that way. What other efficient or what other effective dismissal mechanisms are there?
We have a little bit of fun with demographic numbers, and I run this by height. And I remember him being kind of like, "Don't include the actual percentage." I'm like, "No, we need to include the actual percentages because people are really bad at estimating what the demographics of the U.S. actually looks like, both the right and the left in different ways." So we put it in the numbers, and we talk about being dismissed for being white, or being dismissed for being straight, or being dismissed for being male. And you can already dismiss people for being conservative. And we give examples in the book of these being used to dismiss people, and oftentimes on topics not related to the fact that they're a male or whether or not they're minority. And then we get to, I think it's like layer 6, and we're like, surprise, guess what? You're down to 0.4% of the population, and none of it mattered. Because if you have the wrong opinion, even if you're in that 0.4% of the most intersectional person who ever lived, and you have the wrong opinion, you're a heretic, and you actually probably will be hated even more. Mm-hmm. And the most interesting part of the research we did for this was just asking every prominent Black conservative and moderate that we knew personally, have you been told that you're not really Black for an opinion you had? Every single one of them was like, "Oh yeah, no." And it's kind of funny because it's like oftentimes white lefties telling them that's like, "Oh, do you consider yourself Black?" John McWhorter talked about having a reporter when he showed that he dissented from some of what he described as kind of like woke racism in his book, Woke Ideas. The reporter actually is like, "So do you consider yourself Black?" He's like, yeah. He was like, "What are you, crazy? Of course I do." And Coleman Hughes had one of the best quotes on it. He said, "I'm constantly being told that the most important thing to how legitimate my opinion is whether or not I'm Black. But then when I have a dissenting opinion, I get told I'm not really Black. So, perfect. Like there's no way to falsify this argument." That one really, that investigation really struck me.
So, and you lay this out really nicely in the book that there is this process of saying, "Are you conservative? Yes, you can dismiss the person. Are you white? Dismiss the person. Are you male? You can dismiss the person." There's these categories that make it easier for you to dismiss a person's ideas based on that. And like you said, you end up in that tiny percentage and you can still dismiss.
And it's not just dismiss. We talk about this from a practical standpoint, the way the limitations on reality, and one of them is time. And a lot of cancel culture as cultural norms, as this way of winning arguments without winning arguments, is about running out the clock. Because by the time you get down to the bottom of or actually even to get a couple steps into the perfect rhetorical fortress, and where has the time gone? You probably just give up trying to actually have the argument, and you never get to the argument in the first place.
And all of these things are pretty sticky on social media.
Social media practically invented the perfect rhetorical fortress.
So that each one of those stages has a virality to it.
Yeah.
So it could stick, and then it can get people really excited.
It allows you to feel outrage and superiority.
Yeah. Because of that at the scale of the virality allows you to never get to the actual discussion of the point. But it's not just the left, it's the right.
Sure.
Also, so efficient rhetorical fortress. There's something to be proud of on the right. It's more efficient.
Yeah.
So you don't have to listen to liberals, and anyone can be labeled a liberal if they have a wrong opinion. I've seen liberal and left and leftist all used in the same kind of way.
Yeah.
But that's leftist nonsense. You don't have to listen to experts.
Yep.
Even conservative experts if they have the wrong opinion. You don't have to listen to journalists, even conservative journalists, if they have the wrong opinion. And among the MAGA wing, there's a fourth provision. You don't need to listen to anyone who isn't pro-Trump.
Yeah. And we call it efficient because it eliminates a lot of people you probably should listen to at least sometimes. Like we point out sometimes like how cancel culture can interfere with faith and expertise. So we get kind of being a little suspicious of experts. But at the same time, if you follow that and you follow it mechanically, and I definitely, I think everybody in the U.S. probably has some older uncle who exercises some of these. it is a really efficient way to sort of to wall yourself off from the rest of the world and dismiss, at least some people you really should be listening to.
The way you laid it out, it made me realize that we just take up so much of our brain power with
So much time.
things. It's literally time.
We could be solving things.
And you get you kind of exhaust yourself through this process of being outraged
I know.
based on these labels, and you never get to actually. There's almost not enough time for empathy, for looking at a person and thinking, well, maybe they're right, because you're so busy categorizing them. And it's
what's the fun in empathy? And I mean, what's so interesting about this is that so much societal energy seems to be spent on these nasty primal desires, where essentially a lot of it is like, please tell me who I'm allowed to hate. Where can I legitimately be cruel? Where can I actually exercise some aggression against somebody? And it seems to sometimes be just finding new justifications for that. And it's an understandable, human failing that sometimes can be used to defend justice. But again, it will never get you anywhere near the truth.
One interesting case that you cover about expertise is with COVID.
Yeah.
So how did cancel culture come into play on the topic of COVID?
Yeah, I think that COVID was a big blow to people's faith and expertise, and cancel culture played a big role in that. I think one of the best examples of this is Jennifer Say at Levi's. She is a lovely woman. She was a vice president at Levi's. She talked about actually potentially to be the president of Levi's Jeans. And she was a big advocate for kids. And when they started shutting down the schools, she started saying, this is going to be a disaster. This is going to hurt the poor and disadvantaged kids the most. We have to figure out a way to open the schools back up. And that was such a heretical point of view. And the typical kind of cancel culture wave took over, as he had all sorts of petitions for her to be fired and that she needed to apologize and all this kind of stuff. And she was offered, I think, like $1 million severance, which she wouldn't take because she wanted to tell the world what she thought about this, and that she wanted to continue saying that she hadn't changed her mind, that this was a disaster for young people. And now that's kind of the conventional wisdom, and the research is quite clear that this was devastating to particularly disadvantaged youths. Like, people understand this now as being, okay, she was probably right. But one of the really sad aspects of cancel culture is people forget why you were canceled, and they just know they hate you. There's this lingering kind of like, well, I don't have to take them seriously anymore. But by the way, did you notice they happen to be right on something very important? Now, one funny thing about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech wouldn't exist if you didn't also have the right to say things that were wrong. Because if you can't, engage in ideaphoria, if you can't actually speculate, you'll never actually get to something that's right in the first place. But it's especially galling when people who were right were censored and never actually get the credit that they deserve.